One of the things that I was thinking about earlier was Stockholm Syndrome, because I was contemplating what I had just witnessed take place, and what all of you witnessed take place the past 2 days, and when I took a step back and thought about the planning that went into the crescendo that we witnessed on the 6th, it's jaw-dropping, the meticulous nature and way that things are planned out and scripted in advance. I mean, think about it. They staged a pandemic in such great detail that they have somehow managed to convince the entire world to completely change their way of life. And then, on top of that, in the United States, they wove our 2020 presidential election into the pandemic script, allowing the use of mail-in ballots, justified, of course, by the fact that everyone had to stay home, to sell this story that there was massive election fraud that took place during the presidential election. And then when you actually look into it with an objective mind and say, okay, let's see if there really was election fraud, and you look into it and yeah, this is obvious. And someone will hear me say that and think, oh, great, he's on my side. There was election fraud. No. No, don't get it twisted. That was planned into the script in a genius fashion, because the election fraud narrative played so beautifully into what had been told to the MAGA base for years up until that point about the Great Awakening and the storm that was coming, draining the swamp. Now you have this obvious stolen election from Donald Trump just adding fuel to that fire. And that energy was allowed to build up into that base to the point where then they could, through their agent provocateurs, stage this domestic terrorism event and make it believable. And then use that event, as they use every other similar event, to bring all kinds of changes in that serves their larger agenda. But the true stroke of genius here was that as a result of the staged domestic terrorist event, they were then able to sweep the obvious election fraud under the rug and have it not be investigated by Congress, not have a new impartial audit. Because everyone that was saying that they were in favor of that, to fire up the base, again, like Trump fired up the base with his speech on that day, to make it all seem believable. Well, then now they had the excuse of, oh, well, I was going to ask for this, but now the fate of our democracy is at stake. And they use the word democracy. What they mean is republic, because the United States is a constitutional republic with a representative democratic aspect, right? What democracy, when they say that in the news, that's a code word for dictatorship, where they give you the illusion of a vote, but really they're just dictating everything that happens and providing you with the illusion of a voice and some form of freedom. But then they had the excuse, right, where they could say, oh, well, I was going to ask for this, but not anymore. The fate of the country is at stake here. No, we need to stamp this out and not go any further with this election fraud narrative. So that was just so genius, the way that they wove everything together and just took it all out right there with one event. Swept everything under the rug, and now that's that. And Biden will be sworn in, and they will have all of the ammunition that they need to pass sweeping social media reforms that will stamp out much of what we would consider to be conspiracy theorist topics And that was all part of the larger design to corral the Wild West of the internet and make it a corporate-friendly environment where only the official narrative is supported. It's genius. And I sat there thinking, do I have Stockholm Syndrome when I'm thinking about that? Am I in love with my captors here and in awe of their genius somehow? And I thought about it more, and it's not that. It's just respecting your opponent, right? A lot of these fake conspiracy theorists try to get you into the mindset of, oh, I figured it out. I know exactly what they're going to do and when they're going to do it. We know them now. We got them. And it's like, no, if you had them, you would have a YouTube channel or a blog that laid out the script in great detail about what they were going to do. And sure, some of us might have the outline, but we don't have them in the sense that we can predict the events that are going to transpire. I mean, if you got really into the weeds with this stuff and you got into the numbers and the larger symbolic threads, you might be able to predict something within a reasonable amount of time of when it actually happens. But, I mean, you'd have to be Rain Man to be able to put all of that together. And that, always just leads to the idea of, well, is this a human mind that came up with this? Is this a human mind doing this scripting in advance? Because you look at it in hindsight and you think, oh, there's no way. But then you sit there and you say, well, hold on a second. I have a human mind, I think. And I'm able to understand all of this with great clarity after the fact. So if I can understand it after the fact, then plausibly we could say with reasonable credibility that a human mind like mine could have come up with it and written it out, and then they put it into practice just as easily as it could be some non-human mind or entity that did it. So that's kind of an aside. I was thinking about that earlier, but what I really wanted to get into, just as a way to kind of detach from everything that's going on, is to look at this from, a different perspective, a bigger picture analysis of tones, sound waves, just music in general. And it's funny, I was bringing this up right as the rain started to increase. And now that's providing a different soundtrack for my stream of consciousness, and I got to adjust to it. But anyway, my mind shifted in that sonic direction because I started thinking about that Chappelle Show skit that I mentioned in the last recording, and I actually went back and watched it again. And it was funnier than I remember it being. But there was a lot of truth in that short little skit. And this is part of having intuition, right? Part of, in the sense that you can be given anything. A scene from a television show, an encounter in your ordinary daily life with a stranger, anything you can imagine is a scenario where you're able to extract a lesson. You're able to see how, oh, that's kind of like this, or this is kind of like that. It's the extraction of metaphors that intuition really provides you with. But that's kind of what I saw when I watched this Chappelle Show skit. I was going in all kinds of different directions about how, oh, this is kind of like that. Oh, it's similar to that too. And so let me explain. It starts with John Mayer and Dave Chappelle playing electric guitar for some white people in a corporate environment. Classic office environment. And please, forget about who John Mayer really is or who Dave Chappelle really is and what agenda they're actually serving. Forget about all that for a second. Just stay with me here on what you can extract from what they showed you. And they go into this office, and the premise, of course, is that white people can't help but dance when they hear an electric guitar. And there's so much truth to that statement. It's hilarious, right? Because I am a white person, and when I hear an electric guitar, or just a guitar in general, I can't stop myself from swaying with it a little bit. I mean, obviously there are limits to that. There are some songs that my body rejects as terrible, and that's a subjective thing that's different for everybody. But for the most part, you hear a searing guitar riff or solo, and you start swaying to it, or it moves you in a certain way. And so sure enough, they go into this office, and John Mayer starts playing it, and they all start swaying, and it's all very hilarious. But then in the next scene, they go into a restaurant that is filled with a similar crowd. It's set up like a scene from a typical lunch break in a part of the city that has a lot of 9-to-5ers. And John Mayer starts playing this really heavy riff. Not quite heavy metal, but a really hard riff. And then they show people, breaking bottles over each other's heads and starting to go crazy. And then from there, they go to the barbershop scene that I described, where it's mostly blacks and Latinos that are in there. And then I won't say any more about it. You should just watch it on your own because it's so funny. But they play drums and an electric piano, and then Dave shows how, yes, the black people in the barbershop are dancing to the drums just like the white people were swaying to the electric guitar. And the Latinos in the barbershop were dancing to the electric piano, and he also adds a megaphone to it. In any event, this is a very poignant thing that he's showing everyone. It's subtle, but it's very poignant, Hey, there's all this propaganda out there that tries to pit races against each other, where they would say, oh, white people can't dance, or whatever the case might be. And Chappelle's making this point. No, you see, we're all different. We're just wired in different ways, and certain rhythms, certain sonic sound wave vibrations hit our genetics differently. And that's all it is. We're just dancing in a different way. And of course, this doesn't mean that you're locked into something if you have a specific genetic makeup. Obviously, everybody can appreciate good music no matter who it's coming from. And then at the end of the skit, he has this great message like, hey, people of Earth, keep dancing no matter what moves you to do so. And, I don't know if that Dave Chappelle is a clone of himself now, or if they neutralized him in some other way. But obviously it's not the same person that was making that kind of video, the version of him that's out there now. And you can make your own decision about what that's all about. That's kind of beyond the scope of what I wanted to get into, because aside from, that subtle undercurrent that was sort of bringing people together of different races to kind of see each other as the same thing, just expressing itself differently. There's also a lot of truth about how music and tone and sound wave vibrations in general are used to manipulate us. And he shows this very clearly in the first scene where John Mayer is playing kind of this psychedelic guitar riff, and people are just kind of swaying, and then hilariously they pan back before they leave to a girl who had just taken her top off and her breasts are exposed. And that's so true. And then in the next scene, he's playing this hard riff, and people are aggressive and agitated. And you can see how they do this in the news, for example, right? Just think about the way that they associate tones with the graphics of breaking news. If you've ever had the television on when a breaking news story comes on, like when they interrupt regular programming for a breaking quote-unquote news story, and they'll have that tone with it that it shifts your body into a different dimension almost, right? You have a whole different state of being based on the sound waves that they're putting into your awareness in that given moment. And that, of course, is a tool of manipulation. They do the same thing in movies, of course, right? Every movie has a score, and they manipulate your emotions with the score. You know, I've always wanted to do, like as an experiment, watch a movie that really moved me emotionally, but take out the music and see if it still had the same effect, and I guarantee it wouldn't. Because it's really the music a lot of the time that produces your emotional reaction. Sure, images can produce emotional reactions. I mean, if you watch a video of a factory farm or a video of starving children. My recorder memory was full right when I was talking about seeing images of children starving or something like that can produce an emotional response. But the sonic information seems like it's more capable of producing emotion than imagery is. And then, of course, when they're put together, well, that's when the really powerful experience can take place, and that is what movies and television and the news specialize in. Especially as it's related to the news, right? I mean, it's called the newscast. You have the anchors that are delivering the news to you, and these are all terms that make it so obvious in hindsight what's really going on. In mind control terms, you have alters and anchors. And it's no accident that they're called news anchors, because they are anchoring the alters that the media is creating through the broadcast, right? In a sense, casting a spell. The politicians are just as aware and trained in this as the newscasters are. They, of course, use neurolinguistic programming. They have all kinds of body language going on that is designed to anchor what they're saying in your mind, to convince your mind of certain things without even referencing the words that they're using. That's all taking place on a subconscious level. Dual meaning in what they're speaking. Right? Many people have pointed out, how many times has Joe Biden used the term dark winter already? Or when he gave his address in the aftermath of the Capitol storming, he put the words together, disorder, chaos. They were right next to each other. What an interesting two words to put together in the context of the larger speech that he gave, pointing to an insurrection that needed to be dealt with. But bigger than that, they're aware of the power of the tone that they use, of the sound wave vibration that they are transmitting. And this is why the politicians have a certain way that they speak. Maybe President Obama was the best example of this. He has this really strange meter to the way that he speaks. And if you don't know, he modeled it after a famous actor. Well, I don't know how famous he is, but you can find the actor that trained him to speak like him. He's mimicking him, basically. But they always have that meter that's kind of designed to hypnotize you and put you in this trance-like state when you listen to them talk. And they all do this. Obviously, this is what President Trump did when he gave that speech right before he sent off all those protesters to go up to Capitol Hill. He was charging them up with rhetoric and a tone that he was transmitting that was meant to agitate their energetic fields, get them not thinking clearly. This is what this type of thing is capable of doing. It's so funny. Every time that I see footage of a MAGA rally, I see American flags and don't tread on me flags, and I hear chants like USA, USA. And many years ago, I went to a lot of World Cup qualifiers, which is the United States soccer team's path to qualifying for the World Cup, obviously. But they play these qualifiers all over the country against teams from our region. And I went to many of these games. And when we're tailgating in the parking lot, all you see are American flags and Don't Tread on Me flags and USA jerseys and people in red, white, and blue. And all you hear are chants of USA, USA. And every time I see a MAGA rally or anything along those lines, that's the first thought that pops in my head is, wow, this is like a sporting event. And isn't that so true, what they've turned politics into? It's a team-based philosophy. It's I support my team until the end, no matter what comes out or what anyone else says. This is my team and I'm loyal to them. To the point where someone like TMZ or Entertainment Tonight or CNN or ABC cover a political event like it's a sporting event. And now the lines have blurred on the other side too, where if you watch a sporting event, it's like a political event. So they've just merged the whole thing together. I mean, they even call it a political rally now. And I mean, what do we all have in high school? We have pep rallies. Like, they teach us to do that at a very early age, to bring all of our energy into one place and channel it into something, some idea that everyone can feed off of. That is the very basis of the idea of a thought form, of an egregore. It's just that they give us the thought form to channel our energy into all the time, in every aspect of life that you can think of. To the point where you have this rally labeled as a quote-unquote MAGA protest, and they are all giving their energy willingly to this one person who supposedly represents all of the things that they believe in. They give their energy to it, and that person that's in that place feeds off of it. And that's why these people are selected and trained from a very young age to play these roles, because that's a lot of power that they wield. And so they have to be fully controlled and fully a part of the agenda. And speaking of sound waves and music, the same thing is taking place at a concert, right? All of these people come together for this band that they love, and they willingly give themselves into the experience. They give their energy to whoever's on the stage. And that's like a drug to those guys who are on the stage. And they get addicted to it like you can get addicted to any drug. They never want to lose that feeling, that rush that they get. And that's what got me thinking about how this tailgate that I was at for a U.S. soccer game is exactly the same thing that's taking place at this political rally. The way that they're using slogans and patriotism and a certain tone, a certain vibe to channel energy. And when you look around you, that's what society is. It's one big energy channeling ritual at all times. And this is why someone would say, well, don't feed your energy into it. But then that often gets taken as, well, don't pay attention, just turn it all off and don't worry about it. But yeah, I think there's a middle ground there, right? Where you can know what's going on, not feed into it, and still describe it and be aware of it. A sort of neutral detachment to everything around you. But this type of stuff is everywhere. I was thinking too, just a mundane example, like police sirens. Think about how jarring a police siren is. It's very loud and obnoxious and just puts you in this mood that is not beneficial to anyone. I mean, expand your mind here. They could have chosen any sonic frequency to projects out of the siren system. It could be the most pleasant tone that you can think of, and that might actually help, right? If these police are responding to charged situations, for the most part, it might help to roll up, playing something that would disarm people. But obviously, they chose the tone that they chose for a reason, because this further agitates subconsciously and just objectively further makes the situation tense, gets the officers on edge, and whoever they're responding to and interacting with puts them on edge as well. And then that leads to altercations, that leads to arrests, that keeps the prisons full, that keeps the justice system functioning, and that keeps the underclass of society in place and ensures that they're not moving upward in any great way or fashion. And this keeps the class system in place. But you could imagine easily a situation where the sirens, quote unquote, were some pleasant frequency, some pleasant noise that disarmed anyone, and crime would be reduced by like 200% in the first 3 months that they tried this. For that very reason. Somebody would hear that noise coming up and like, oh, it's the cops. Yeah, they're going to be chill with me. All right, yeah, I'll be chill too. But then people, because they're programmed robots, no offense, but you are, in the way that you respond to these kinds of things, it's not your fault, but you are, they'll say things like, but they gotta make it known that they're coming so the cars get out of their way. What about ambulances? And it's like, okay, guys, okay, we could make little exceptions. We could have a special tone. That means, hey, I'm driving at a high speed and need to pass. Please get over for me. We could come up with that. We're smart people, okay? I'm just spitballing here. Just little examples of ideas that could change the fabric of society. Or not totally change the fabric of society, but help along those lines, But it's funny, too, right, how this sort of interplays with the idea of the music of the spheres that I was going into on the video about the Great Conjunction. And this might be the topic for a future recording, but think about the coincidence here, in quotes, of course, that the Charlottesville protest, where someone allegedly died, I think, by getting hit by a car, I believe is what happened. I can't remember exactly if they died. Any event, there was a quote-unquote domestic terrorist act at the Charlottesville protest, and that was right after or before or during, again, I can't remember exactly, the first part of the Great American Eclipse, what they referred to as that. And this is that eclipse pattern that started in 2017 and will finish in 2024. And it makes this big X over the heartland of America, sort of around Nashville, right? And then we have this great conjunction in 2020, sort of into 2021, near the halfway point of 2017 and 2024. And we have that Nashville bombing, and then we have this staged Capitol storming protest. And it's so interesting how, similarly, we had the end of the Mayan calendar hyped up December 21st, 2012. 7 days before that, we have the Sandy Hook shooting, December 14th, 2012. So by deduction, we can conclude that there will most likely be an event on that level near the next Great American Eclipse in 2024, if we're going by this pattern. But bigger than that, you see how the music of the spheres idea plays into this here, where the planets are vibrating in their motion, transmitting a tune, a tone, a signal that we are assimilating into our stream of consciousness and our state of being on the planet at any given moment. And during these certain alignments, there's more energy or a different type of energy. And then they have these events kick off, knowing that's taking place, and it somehow amplifies them. Because it's like I said, they're putting lyrics over the tune, and they're putting these foul, disgusting lyrics over the tune that influences how we believe the future will unfold. And that influences our imagination, which is limitless in its potential, but it puts a dark twist on our imagination, and we get down and think there's no hope, right? When the reality is, no, our imagination is incredible. We can achieve anything that we put our minds to. Insert cliche here, but it's true. It's so true. And we just gotta understand what's going on and not feed into it, understand that it's there, deflect it. It's a very martial artist idea, right? It's very flowish in how you're perceiving all of these things coming at you and just sort of moving and deflecting. Oh, kind of moving like you might sway if you're white to a electric guitar, or how you might feel the beat of the drums or the synthetic piano, or I don't want to leave the Asians out, whatever you guys like the best. I don't really know. But you get the idea, right? I think that's a great way to end this. So I'll leave it there. I hope you guys have a fantastic day, evening, whenever you're listening to this. Later.